Grace and peace. As we are telling devotional stories, I share with you an Abraham Lincoln story. I have like a collection of them. This is another one that I absolutely adore, and it is about Abraham Lincoln and Peter Cartwright, who you may or may not know. He was a Methodist a preacher, usually tent revival kind of preacher. He was also in the legislature here in Illinois in the 1830s, and he ran against Lincoln twice. He beat him the first time, Lincoln beat him the second time. But the story is that as Lincoln was trying to size up Peter Cartwright and figure out what was going on, he attended one of Cartwright's events, and Cartwright was working up the crowd and doing what Peter Cartwright would normally do, and he saw Lincoln in the crowd, and so eventually he wound up the crowd, and to the point where he's like, at least so the story goes, if you want to go to heaven, you should stand, and everybody stood. Lincoln remained seated, and if you don't want to go to hell, you should stand, and everybody stood. Lincoln remained seated, and Peter Cartwright called him out. Mr. Lincoln, I've noticed, right, that you didn't stand, and then inquired of him. So I ask you, sir, where do you want to go? And Lincoln said something very much like, I came here as a respectful listener. I believe in treating religious matters with due solemnity. I admit the questions given by Brother Cartwright are of great importance, but I do not feel called upon to answer as the rest have done. But Brother Cartwright, you asked me directly where I want to go, so I desire to reply with equal directness. I want to go to Congress. Now, that particular election, Mr. Lincoln did not go to Congress, but the one that followed in 1846, he beat Mr. Cartwright, and then Mr. Cartwright became one of the spokespeople who came to speak in support of Lincoln when Lincoln was running for the presidential office. So there's a reason I collect Lincoln stories. I love this particular story because Lincoln didn't get swept up in the emotion or the fervor, Are you going to heaven? Would you like to avoid going to hell? He was there to address whether or not he was going to Congress. And we can get swayed by all of these trivial, heaven and hell, not a trivial matter, but we can get swayed by these other positions that are out there. President Lincoln, in his self-differentiated way, he kept his focus. So not to be swayed to and fro by every wind or whim, but to keep that focus and to keep your center in the midst of every other turmoil. I love that story because it reminds me of how we are called upon. And yes, it's a Lincoln story, who's not a passionately religious man, of course, but he was centered, and he knew right from wrong. And there we have, I believe, a wonderful, devotion-worthy story of how we keep our center, not to be swayed by every wind and whim, but may we be centered and know who we are and whose we are.